Hold still, little help. I want to see if poverty washes off with expensive tea. Tristan Beaumont's voice sliced through the crystal ballroom as he tilted the porcelain teapot toward 12-year-old Celeste Jackson. The scalding Earl Grey cascaded over her braided hair, the hot liquid soaking through her starched maid's uniform as 300 guests froze in stunned silence. Celeste's small frame trembled, tea dripping from her chin onto the polished marble floor. Victor Beaumont's booming laugh shattered the quiet. That's my boy! Teaching the staff their place early! Natasha raised her champagne flute in mock salute, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she pulled out her phone to record. Celeste stood motionless, and not one person in that ballroom understood they had just humiliated the daughter of the woman who controlled their entire future. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The microphone screeched as a woman in a maid's uniform walked toward the stage. Her steps were measured, deliberate, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who owned the room rather than cleaned it. Charleston Jackson's face remained composed as she passed tables of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos, ignoring the whispers that rippled through the crowd. She took the microphone from the stunned MC's hand. Good evening. My name is Charleston Jackson, and for 15 years you've known me as the Beaumont's housekeeper. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. What you don't know is that I hold majority ownership of the shell companies financing Beaumont Industries' $720 million aerospace contract with the European Space Coalition. The ballroom erupted. Guests rose from their seats, conversations exploding across the marble floors. Victor Beaumont's face strained of color, his earlier laughter dying in his throat. Natasha grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Effective immediately, Charleston continued. That contract is terminated. 2 security guards approached the stage, but a woman in a charcoal suit intercepted them, producing a leather portfolio. Patricia Gary, legal counsel. My client's documentation is in order. Touch her, and we file assault charges before she reaches the floor. Victor found his voice, raw with rage. You can't do this. That contract is binding. We have lawyers' connections, we'll bury you. With what money? Charleston's eyes were steel. The contract represents 68% of your projected revenue. Check your accounts, Victor. The funds were released on my authority 30 minutes ago. Natasha's confusion twisted into something uglier. You manipulative, you've been in our home, around our son, lying this entire time. I've been documenting. Charleston descended the stage steps, each word landing like a verdict. 15 years of wage theft. Patent fraud. Exploitation of immigrant workers whose designs you stole and claimed as your own. She reached Celeste, who stood trembling, tea still dripping from her uniform. Charleston took her daughter's small hand in hers. And tonight you humiliated my child for your entertainment. The ballroom fell silent. Somewhere in the back, a champagne flute shattered against marble. Victor lunged forward, but security held him back as Patricia stepped between them. Charleston looked at Celeste, squeezed her hand once, and together they walked toward the gilded doors. Behind them, the Beaumont empire began its collapse with the sound of frantic phone calls and rising panic. The crystal chandeliers still glittered overhead, but the light had shifted. For the first time in 15 years, Charleston Jackson walked out of a room as herself. The apartment was small, nothing like the Beaumont mansion's marble halls and vaulted ceilings. Celeste sat on their worn sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her hair still damp from washing out the tea. The television flickered with breaking news. Beaumont Industries in freefall after shocking gala revelation. Why did we wait so long? Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. Charleston settled beside her daughter, pulling her close. Because revenge without proof is just noise, baby. And I needed ironclad proof. She thought back to that first day, 23 years old with a fresh MIT doctorate and a fabricated story. The desperate immigrant widow, credentials carefully hidden, begging for housekeeping work. Victor had barely glanced at her before agreeing, pleased to have someone grateful and invisible. Those early years, she'd scrubbed their floors during the day and studied their business files at night. The Beaumonts never locked their home office, never imagined their housekeeper could read the engineering schematics they'd stolen from a Chilean contractor, or understand the financial documents detailing systematic wage theft. She'd documented everything with a scanner small enough to fit in her cleaning caddy. Your father, Celeste said carefully. The one who died. Never existed. Charleston's voice was steady. I needed a story that made me seem helpless, unthreatening. A widow with a baby was perfect. They never asked questions. Late nights in that same home office, Charleston had built the aerospace technology on the Beaumont's own computer, using their electricity, their Wi-Fi, their resources. The propulsion system that would eventually secure the European Space Coalition contract had been designed at 3 a.m. while they slept upstairs, oblivious. Her phone buzzed. Patricia Gary's message was brief. Stock down 40%. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. They're panicking. Another text followed from Marcus Rivera, the lead pro bono attorney. Legal team assembled. Expect custody threats, immigration harassment, media smears. We're ready. Charleston showed Celeste the messages. They're going to fight back, baby. It's going to get ugly. Celeste looked at her mother, really looked at her, seeing not just the woman who'd raised her but the strategist who'd spent 15 years building a calculated dismantling. You knew they would. I've known since the beginning. Charleston pulled up a folder on her laptop, years of documented evidence organized by category. That's why I waited. That's why we endured. Because when you come for people like the Beaumonts, you only get one shot. On the television, analysts speculated about Beaumont Industries' survival. The tickers showed their stock in freefall, hemorrhaging value by the minute. Charleston closed the laptop and held her daughter tighter. The architecture of revenge had taken 15 years to build. Now came the hard part, withstanding the collapse. Victor Beaumont slammed the investigator's report on his mahogany desk hard enough to rattle the crystal paperweight. What do you mean you can't trace it? The private investigator from Blackstone Securities shifted in his seat. The shell companies are registered across 4 jurisdictions: Cayman Islands, Delaware, Singapore, Luxembourg. Whoever structured this knew exactly what they were doing. We found the companies that hold your contract, but the beneficial ownership is buried under layers of corporate veils and nominee directors. She's a housekeeper. Victor's face flushed crimson. How does a housekeeper build something like this? That's what we're trying to determine, Mr. Beaumont. Across town, Natasha Beaumont sat in her former law partner's office, legal pads spread across the conference table. Her prosecutor instincts hadn't dulled in retirement. We build the custody case on instability. A woman who spent 15 years living a lie, who subjected her daughter to a household under false pretenses, who's now exposed that child to public scrutiny and media attention. Her colleague nodded slowly. Inappropriate environment. Obsessive behavior. Using the child as a pawn in a revenge scheme. Exactly. Natasha's pen moved across the page in sharp, calculated strokes. We paint her as unhinged, dangerous. By the time we're done, no judge will leave that girl in her care. Charleston's phone rang as she reviewed engineering schematics at her Kit Gary table. The caller ID showed an international number. Dr. Jackson speaking. Dr. Jackson, this is Henrik Svensson with the European Space Coalition. I apologize for the unusual circumstances, but we've been following the news with great interest. His Swedish accent was precise, professional. Your claims about designing the propulsion technology, we'd like to discuss this directly with you. Charleston's pulse quickened. I have the complete design documentation, prototype test results, and developmental timeline. All of it predates Beaumont Industries' involvement by 18 months. That's precisely what we need to see. Can you meet with our technical committee next week? I'll be there. She ended the call and immediately texted Patricia Gary. The reply came within seconds. Perfect. Let them come to you. In the Beaumont Industries boardroom, panic had settled like fog. The engineering team stood before Victor with printouts of the propulsion system schematics, their faces pale. We don't understand it, the lead engineer admitted. The mathematics is beyond our current capabilities. Without Dr. Jackson's documentation, without her explaining the underlying principles, we can't replicate it. We can't even properly maintain what we have. Victor stared at the incomprehensible equations covering the pages. 15 years of his housekeeper moving through his home, invisible and underestimated, while she built technology he couldn't begin to comprehend. Natasha appeared in the doorway, her expression hard. The lawyers are drafting the custody filing. If we can't control her through the contract, we'll destroy her through her daughter. Victor nodded slowly, but his hands trembled as he gathered the useless schematics. For the first time in his life, he was facing an opponent he didn't understand and couldn't intimidate. And she'd been invisible all along. The morning talk shows lit up with coordinated fury. Across 3 networks simultaneously, the same narrative emerged with suspicious precision. Modern-day con artists, read the churn on one screen. Another proclaimed, housekeeper or corporate spy? Guest commentators leaned into their microphones with manufactured outrage. This woman infiltrated a family's home, a business analyst declared on the 8 a.m. segment. She gained their trust, lived under their roof, and systematically destroyed them. Is this entrepreneurship or is this espionage? The afternoon shows grew uglier. Did this woman seduce her way to corporate espionage? A host asked, eyebrows raised suggestively. The panel erupted into debate, dissecting Charleston's appearance, her past, her motives as if she were a specimen rather than a person. Celeste kept her head down as she walked through the school hallway, but the whispers followed like smoke. That's her. The scammer's kid. Someone had printed screenshots from Twitter and taped them to her locker. Gold digger's daughter. One read. Another simply said fraud, in red marker. At lunch, Madison Pierce sat down across from her, phone already recording. So did your mom sleep with Mr. Beaumont? Is that how she got access? The question was loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. Celeste grabbed her tray and left, the laughter trailing behind her. That evening, Charleston stood before a modest gathering of reporters in Patricia Gary's conference room. No PR team, no polished backdrop, just a woman in a simple blue blouse facing cameras with steady eyes. I didn't infiltrate their home, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years. I built their future while scrubbing their floors. I designed breakthrough aerospace technology on their own computer while they slept. The Beaumonts didn't see me as capable of genius because they didn't see me at all. A reporter from the business section raised her hand. Ms. Jackson, can you prove you designed this technology? Dr. Jackson, Charleston corrected gently. MIT Aerospace Engineering. And yes, I can prove everything. The footage went viral by midnight, but not in the way the Beaumonts had hoped. Journalists began asking different questions. A financial reporter pulled records of Beaumont Industries' past contracts. An investigative team contacted former employees. Someone found a Chilean engineer willing to talk about stolen designs from 2015. The narrative was shifting, slowly but inexorably, like a ship changing course. Victor watched the coverage from his study, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. Natasha stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp as she berated their PR firm. I don't care what it costs. Bury her. But some things, once brought to light, refused to be buried. Across the city, Celeste finally looked at her mother and asked, Are we going to be okay? Charleston pulled her daughter close. We're going to be more than okay, baby. We're going to be free. The family courthouse smelled of floor polish and desperation. Charleston sat beside Patricia Gary at the respondents' table, her hands folded in her lap, while across the aisle Natasha Beaumont conferred with a team of attorneys in $1,000 suits. Your Honor, Natasha's lead counsel began, his voice dripping with concern. We're here today because a child is being used as a weapon. Ms. Jackson has subjected her daughter to a calculated, 15-year deception. She's exposed this child to public humiliation, media scrutiny, and an unstable home environment driven by obsessive revenge. He placed an enlarged photo on the easel, Celeste at the gala, tea dripping down her face. This child was deliberately placed in harm's way. The respondent orchestrated this entire scenario, using her daughter as a pawn in corporate espionage. The second attorney stood. Financial records show Ms. Jackson has no stable employment, no verifiable income. She's living in a modest apartment after years of. He paused dramatically. Deceiving a family who trusted her, who welcomed her into their home. Patricia rose, her voice cutting through the theatrics. Your Honor, may I present Celeste Jackson's school records? She handed documents to the clerk. Straight A's for 6 consecutive years. Perfect attendance. Multiple academic awards. Here are psychological evaluations from 2 independent counselors, both confirming a well-adjusted, emotionally healthy child. She turned to face the Beaumont's attorneys. My client holds a doctorate from MIT. She's the principal designer of aerospace technology valued at over $700 million. The modest apartment is a conscious choice, not financial instability. And regarding the gala incident, Patricia's voice hardened. It was the Beaumont's son who assaulted a 12-year-old child while his parents filmed and laughed. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents in silence. The courtroom held its breath. I'm denying the emergency custody petition, she finally said. However, I'm ordering a home evaluation within 30 days. We'll reconvene after the evaluation is complete. Her gaze shifted to Natasha. And Mrs. Beaumont, correlation is not causation. Being subjected to assault is not the same as being used as a pawn. That night, Charleston spread 15 years of evidence across their Kit Gary table. Bank statements, hidden camera footage, stolen patent documents, testimony transcripts from 47 immigrant workers. This is why we stayed, she said softly, watching Celeste's eyes move across the papers. Every floor I scrubbed, every insult I swallowed, every time they treated us as invisible, I was documenting. Building a case so airtight they couldn't escape it. Celeste picked up a photo of a Guatemalan engineer, his resignation letter paper clipped to stolen designs bearing Victor's signature. All these people? All of them. Charleston's voice cracked. This is what we're fighting for, baby. Not just us. Everyone they've ever exploited. Celeste looked at her mother, really understanding for the first time the weight she'd carried for 15 years. We finish it together, she whispered. Charleston pulled her daughter close. The evidence of systematic injustice spread before them like a map to justice. The knock came at 7 in the morning, hard and official. Charleston opened the door to find 3 IC agents, badges already displayed. Charleston Jackson? The lead agent consulted his tablet. We've received reports of potential visa violations. We need to ask you some questions. Celeste froze at the Kit Gary table, cereal spoon halfway to her mouth. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in as the agents stepped inside without waiting for permission. Ma'am, our records indicate you entered the country on a work visa in 2009. Can you provide documentation of your current legal status? Charleston's mind raced through 15 years of careful planning, but this she hadn't anticipated. I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in Houston. That's not what our information shows. The agent's voice was flat, procedural. We have reports that you overstayed a work visa and have been living here illegally while working under false pretenses. Celeste watched her mother's hands tremble slightly before Charleston steadied them. The agent moved closer, hand resting on his belt. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us while we verify. Don't move. Patricia Gary appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Agent, my client is a natural-born U.S. citizen. This is harassment based on fabricated tips. Within 20 minutes, Patricia had produced Charleston's birth certificate, social security card, and passport. The agents verified the documents, their expressions shifting from authority to embarrassment. Someone filed a false report. The lead agent finally admitted. We're sorry for the inconvenience. But the damage was done. Neighbors had watched from their doorways. Someone had filmed the agents entering. By noon, the footage was everywhere. Aerospace whistleblower investigated for immigration fraud. The headlines didn't mention the agents had left empty-handed. They didn't explain the accusations were fabricated. They just showed a black woman being questioned by IC, and for many viewers, that was evidence enough. Celeste didn't speak that evening. Or the next day. Or the day after that. She moved through their apartment like a ghost, eating when told, sleeping fitfully, but refusing to form words. Charleston watched her daughter disappear into silence, watched the light dim in her eyes. On the third night, Charleston sat on the edge of Celeste's bed. "Baby, please. Talk to me." Celeste's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "They were going to take you. I thought they were going to take you away and I'd be alone." Charleston pulled her daughter close, feeling the tremors run through her small body. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." But they both knew the Beaumonts had found a new weapon, one that cut deeper than contracts or custody threats. They'd weaponized fear itself, the immigrant fear that lives in the bones even when the papers are perfect. And somewhere across the city, Natasha Beaumont smiled at her phone, already planning the next attack. The social worker's badge read, "Jennifer Martinez, Child Protective Services." She stood in their small living room, clipboard in hand, her expression carefully neutral as she surveyed the tidy apartment. "I'm here following anonymous reports of educational neglect and potential emotional abuse," she said, though her tone suggested discomfort. "I need to interview Celeste alone and inspect the living conditions." Charleston stepped aside, watching as Ms. Martinez examined Celeste's room, the neat desk, the shelf of academic awards, the well-organized homework folders. The social worker's frown deepened with each perfect detail she documented. "These allegations mention lack of supervision, unstable housing, exposure to dangerous situations." Ms. Martinez looked directly at Charleston. "Yet I'm seeing a clean home, a child with exemplary school records, and very obvious signs this complaint is fabricated. Then why are you here?" Charleston's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. "Because I have to complete the investigation. That's how they win, by using the system itself as a weapon." She closed her notebook. "I'll file my report within 48 hours. You have nothing to worry about from my assessment." But Celeste had already heard enough. As soon as Ms. Martinez left, she walked to the bathroom and locked the door. The sound of her sobbing echoed through the thin walls. "Celeste, baby, open the door." Charleston tried the handle, panic rising in her chest. "Why did we have to live with them?" Celeste's voice broke on every word. "Why couldn't we just be normal? Why couldn't you just be a regular mom with a regular job and we could have been happy?" Charleston slid down the door until she sat on the floor, back pressed against the wood, tears streaming freely now. The evidence files lay scattered beside her, 15 years of documentation, 47 workers' testimonies, proof of systematic exploitation. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "I thought justice was worth it." Was it? Was destroying the Beaumonts worth her daughter's trauma? Worth the CPS visits, the IC agents, the media attacks? Worth watching her baby lock herself in a bathroom because she couldn't bear the weight anymore? The night stretched long and dark. Charleston stayed at the door, listening to Celeste's breathing gradually slow, hearing her daughter cry herself into exhausted silence. Dawn light crept through the apartment window. The lock clicked. Celeste emerged, eyes swollen and red, and collapsed into her mother's arms on the bathroom floor. They held each other as the sun rose, two souls battered by a war they hadn't chosen but couldn't abandon. Finally, Celeste pulled back and looked at her mother with startling clarity. "Finish it, Mama." Her voice was hoarse but determined. "For everyone they hurt. For all those people in your files who couldn't fight back. Finish it." Charleston cupped her daughter's face, seeing not just her child but a warrior forged in fire. "Together," she promised. "Together," Celeste agreed. The boardroom at Beaumont Industries headquarters filled with shareholders, their murmurs creating a nervous hum. Victor stood at the head of the table, confident that he'd finally corner Charleston into selling her stake at a fraction of its value. The doors opened. Charleston walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, Celeste beside her in a matching blazer. Every conversation stopped. Without a word, Charleston connected her laptop to the presentation screen. My name is Dr. Charleston Jackson. For 15 years, you knew me as your housekeeper. The first slide appeared, a photo of her scrubbing the Beaumont mansion floors. The next showed her MIT doctorate. Let me show you what I've documented while cleaning their toilets. Hidden camera footage filled the screen, Victor mocking a Filipino engineer's accent, Natasha dismissing immigrant workers as cheap labor we can exploit. Financial records appeared next, showing stolen patents from 47 immigrant engineers, each design bearing a Beaumont signature despite originating from workers paid minimum wage. The room sat in stunned silence as testimony after testimony played. Workers describing wage theft, stolen intellectual property, threats of deportation if they complained. The aerospace technology that secured the $720 million contract? Charleston advanced to the next slide, complex propulsion schematics. I designed 100% of it. The Beaumonts can't even read these equations, much less replicate them. She pulled up an email from Victor to his engineering team. Get the housekeeper's notes from my office computer. We need her calculations for the presentation. Victor's face turned crimson. This is slander. Illegal surveillance. The boardroom doors opened. Federal agents entered, badges displayed. One more thing, Charleston said calmly. Effective immediately, I'm transferring my majority stake to an employee cooperative. Beaumont Industries is now owned by the workers you've exploited for 3 generations. Victor lunged toward the podium, fury overtaking reason. Security intercepted him as an agent stepped forward with handcuffs. Victor Beaumont, you're under arrest for fraud, racketeering, and systematic wage theft. Natasha stood frozen, her phone slipping from her hand. Charleston took Celeste's hand and walked past the chaos, past the shareholders scrambling for their lawyers, past the Beaumonts' crumbling empire. Behind them, justice finally arrived, 15 years late, but devastating and absolute. 3 months after the shareholders' meeting, the verdict came down, Victor Beaumont, guilty on all counts. 8 years in federal prison for fraud and racketeering. Natasha was disbarred, awaiting trial on conspiracy charges. Tristan had been quietly moved to his grandmother's home in Vermont after his elite academy sent a terse letter explaining that tuition checks had bounced. The Beaumont name, once synonymous with industrial power, now meant only one thing: justice delayed but finally delivered. Beaumont Industries no longer existed. In its place stood Invisible Hands Aerospace, owned entirely by the workers who'd built it with their labor and innovation. 6 months after hot tea had cascaded over her head, Celeste stood before a converted factory building, scissors in hand. At 13, she'd grown taller, her shoulders squared with newfound confidence. The crowd gathered for the grand opening of the Invisible Hands Foundation cheered as she cut the ribbon. Inside, Charleston presented the first grant, $2 million to Carlos Mendoza, a Guatemalan engineer whose propulsion designs the Beaumonts had stolen 5 years earlier. He wept as he accepted, surrounded by 46 other workers who'd finally received recognition for their stolen innovations. That evening, Charleston and Celeste returned to the original ballroom. The same crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, but everything else had transformed. Celeste wore a custom emerald gown, her natural hair styled in elegant braids adorned with gold threading. As they entered, 300 people rose in thunderous applause. Not wealthy donors this time, but immigrant workers, former housekeepers, the engineers whose brilliance had been buried under someone else's signature. Celeste leaned close to her mother, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Mama, can I pour the tea tonight?" Charleston smiled, pulling her daughter close. "We're not here for revenge, baby. We're here to celebrate everyone who's invisible no more." The camera would pull back now if this were a film, back from mother and daughter standing in the center of the ballroom, back to show the faces of people finally seen, finally valued, finally free. The invisible hands that had built empires now held champagne glasses, celebrated their own genius, claimed their rightful place. The Beaumont legacy had crumbled. But from its ruins, something better had grown. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.